our webinars. That way we will be able to share the contents of the webinar later on our basic needs website. So it'll be available there at basicneeds.ucsd.edu. And maybe if one of the panelists can put that in the chat, if folks can see it, that'd be great. All right, so just a couple of housekeeping things. If you have any questions for the panelists, please go ahead and put those questions in the Q&A function. And we will try to get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of the session, but we've got loads of information for you that we're going to be sharing. And we also have quite the dream team of professionals that will be here to answer and give you just a lot of information about off-campus housing and a little bit of information about on-campus housing. So I'd like to introduce them. We've got Damian Ruiz, who is our Basic Needs Housing and Education Coordinator. John Carlos Senior, who is our Director of Student Legal Services on campus. Myself from Student Life. And then we also have Hachia Vu from Housing Administrative Services, Daniela Theas from Centralized Leasing for Grad and Family Housing. And then we also have a basic needs peer educator on the back end helping us with some of our questions. So we're really excited to have you all here today. We know there's a lot of information, lots of questions about off-campus housing, and we hope this will provide you with that information. So I am going to introduce Damian, who will come in and talk a little bit about off-campus housing.
Thank you, Patty, and welcome everyone to the Off-Campus Housing webinar. My name is Damian Ruiz. I use he, they pronouns. As Patty mentioned, I work as the Basic Needs Housing and Education Coordinator. So in my role, it's a little bit of a hybrid role where I do a lot of work on off-campus housing, but I also do a lot of work on the basic needs side. And I also oversee the peer education team. Thank you to our peer educator who is here joining us today to assist with the webinar. Today, I'll be sharing some information with you about off-campus housing, some renting tips, and also some emergency services that we do have available here at the Hub Basic Needs Center and at UC San Diego. Next slide, please. So some of the things I'm going to cover is the off-campus housing website. I'll go over some property search platforms and some recommendations that I have with those platforms. Same thing goes for roommate searching, some first-time renting information that may be helpful, and some information as well for those of you that may have rented before but need a few more tips to get going or to get back into the rental market. And at the end, we'll have some emergency resources. My hope is that you don't end up in an emergency situation, but should you ever need it, I'd rather that everyone has this information available, and then you can contact us if you ever find yourself in that sort of situation. Next slide, please. So the first resource I want to share with you all is the off-campus housing website from UC San Diego. You can see the URL here pasted on the slide. It's offcampushousing.ucsd.edu. And I always like to start with this particular resource because it's very helpful for those of you that are maybe looking to stay close to campus, connect with other students, other UCSD students that may be looking for housing. I'll go into a few more details in just a bit, but two things I want to highlight is, one, you can see the login here. So this website does require login credentials, which helps us make it a little bit safer than, say, other public options. And if you haven't received your credentials for UCSD for any reason, you can request guest access, and we're able to provide that for about 30 days. And on the right side, you can see a little bit of what the website itself looks like when you're looking for either housing, roommates, or resources on off-campus housing. What you see here in this picture is the property listings themselves. And I'll go into more details of that in the next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, the UCSD off-campus housing website is UCSD managed. So listings that go on there are reviewed by our team, and then they are either approved or denied, depending on what the information is posted. I'll say most of the time they're approved. There's usually information that is helpful for students there. And you can find property rental listings that range anywhere from a room rental, a shared room rental, um, apartment shared rentals, and private rentals that might be either for a home or for an apartment itself. It's a really helpful website because most of the listings that you will find will be closer in proximity to campus. So you'll find that most of the complexes posted here are much closer to campus than other public websites, and you'll find information from a lot of property managers or landlords that are used to working with students. So I always recommend this as the first stop for any UC San Diego students that are looking for off-campus housing. And then, as I mentioned, the majority of listings are close to campus, and these are mostly people that are used to working with students. And you'll find budget options perhaps that may fit your needs, where, as you can see here highlighted, we have some around the 600 um, level of rent per month. So I recommend starting there. Depending on what you are looking for, you can arrange, either you can specify that you're looking for a studio, one bedroom, maybe just a bedroom, and you can arrange your listings by price and set a cap to that price that you may be looking for. It's a great place to start and a great place to connect with others that are maybe looking for housing, or property managers that are looking to rent to students. Next slide, please. So moving on to a public property search platform now. There are many. If you've Googled ever apartments in X area, you've probably come up with more websites than you can think, and it can be overwhelming. And this is not to say PadMapper is the one and only website you should use. If you're familiar with another website, please go ahead and continue to use that. But I recommend PadMapper because it's very much active within the landlord and property manager community. And on the other end, it's a little bit less active on the user side, which is good for those looking for housing, because it means that once you contact the listing, it probably doesn't mean that 30 or so people have contacted it before you, in comparison to Craigslist or something of that sort. So as you can see here on the slide, there, one of the things that's helpful for PadMapper is that it has the actual map feature as implied by the name, where once you type where you're looking for housing, you're going to see a bunch of these little red markings pop up. Once they do, you'll be able to click on one and get more information on the right hand side about maybe the leasing terms, the amount of rent that is expected, if there are any requirements of a deposit or first and last month's rent that could be required. And you can specify what you're looking for. Are you looking for something that's short-term or long-term? Are you looking for maybe something that has one, two more bedrooms? And you can have the really helpful at the very top here, the budget slider. I find that that's really helpful to just slide the budget that you're looking for, and you filter out all of those listings that would fall within a budget that you're not looking for. Being the city that we are, they may be listings up to $10,000. I can't imagine who would be looking for that. So you can make sure you filter all of that out to make sure that you find what you're looking for. And one thing that's helpful as well is that when you click on a listing, you may see other similar listings be recommended to you by the website. So if you're not very familiar with San Diego, or where you would be in relationship to campus, it's really helpful to see that. Once you know where UCSD is, you can click on the listing surrounding, and you'll have recommendations. Another thing that's helpful is to know how far maybe it would be to drive to campus should you branch out a little bit more and get an idea of what San Diego may look like um, from a map view. Next slide, please. So moving on now to roommate searching. One of the platforms that I recommend is back to the first resource I shared with you all is the off-campus housing website. So if you click on the off-campus housing website and then you go to the tabs at the top, you'll see that there's a section labeled roommates. So if you go on there, it's a section in which students can create their own roommate profiles, and they can also browse the listings of other people that are looking for roommates themselves. So you can include important information about what you are like as a roommate. If you're looking for a more quiet environment, maybe you're looking for an environment that's a little more active and you don't mind that there's movement in the house or guests, or perhaps you're looking to be in an environment that is really conducted for studying and you want a quiet environment where there's no overnight guests or anything like that that may impede on that sort of environment that you're looking for. All of this can be indicated on the profiles themselves. If you're looking for housing or a roommate, I recommend that you create a roommate profile. We have over 200 listings as of this month, and that's one of the all-time highs that I've seen in my few years here at UC San Diego. So the more people that are able to sign on here and create a roommate profile, the more options you all will have if you are looking for this sort of living accommodation. So again, I definitely recommend it that you can include information as well as your budget, if you're looking to stay close to campus, if you have a gender preference on your roommates, all of this sort of helpful information you'll be able to indicate and read from others. And this is open to graduate and undergraduate students. Both have access to the website. Next slide, please. So in terms of public roommate searching, I'll say this is something that can get a little bit complicated depending on which sort of website that you use. And we always want to be mindful for student safety, of course. So there may be options that you see. Again, if you type on Google, you may come up with a variety of options. One of the options I recommend is Spare Room. Of course, keeping in mind that this is a platform that's public, so anyone can access this. This is not only for students, but it is helpful for students just because it does have a helpful layout. It's easy to navigate this website, and it's pretty active. So listings get updated pretty much every other day or every day, definitely weekly. And you'll find listings that may be more friendly for a budget. And I can go into a little bit more detail on the next slide. So one of the things that's helpful about a spare room is that you can search for a certain accommodation that you may be looking for. Maybe you're looking for a private room. Maybe you're looking for a shared room that's in the community. And this really brings down the price because you may be able to expand your search and go into areas of San Diego that are not necessarily La Jolla, which we know is an expensive area to be in. But you may find listings that might maybe go even down to the 500 range, which are really rare in San Diego, but in this website, you'll find them. And one thing that's helpful as well is that each listing has quite a bit of information of what the person posting it is like, what they're looking for, what the budget is. Sometimes you'll find really detailed postings that people will post a few paragraphs about themselves and what they're looking for, which is helpful to get that out of the way before you move in with somebody or before you've committed to something long term. You can see what the person is like, and there's quite a bit of information on how to contact, what is included, whether the utilities are included, whether there's some sort of application fee or something like that. All of that information will be on there. And like I said, it's pretty flexible in terms of a budget. If you're looking to save some money and have these sort of accommodations, you can certainly look here with, of course, the caution that it is a public website, but it is a pretty safe website to use. Next slide, please. So Now that I'm on the topic of roommate searching, here are some tips that I've found helpful for students and maybe even for myself when looking for a roommate, or if you know that that's the accommodation that you're going to have, that's the living scenario that you'll be in. So these are some things to just keep in mind. Of course, this is not a step-by-step guide, but this is something that could be helpful. In my position, managing emergency most coordinating most of our emergency housing program, I will say that sometimes what happens is that roommate conflicts can get out of hand and they can be avoided just by having some conversations or some of these thoughts before moving in together. So that's actually my first point. It's important to have conversations with your roommates before you move into a place together so that you're not legally bound together by a lease or something like that, and you still have some flexibility if you find that it doesn't work out for you in the end before moving in. So it's important to discuss what's the rent that is owed and when are the payment dates. Is it the first of the month? Is it right in the middle, or is it something a little bit different that may be indicated in your lease? What are the household preferences? So same thing as I was covering earlier. Is it is it a place where people are okay with smoking, drinking, overnight guests? There's certain noise levels that you want to not go over, or are you okay with those sort of things? It's important to have those conversations. Uh, Substance use, is there a particular understanding you all want to have as roommates, or uh, is there more flexibility in the place that you are looking to join or with the people that you are looking to live? And of course, another thing is the shared areas. Do you have access to all of the apartment, or are you expected to remain only in your room and the particular bathroom that's assigned to you? And as well, other things that may be important are cultural or identity considerations. Are there particular things in your culture that are managed a certain way that you would want to make sure you talk about before moving in? Or maybe things that are important to your identity that you make sure they are covered before you move in together. Next slide, please. So of course, we all know we are in a COVID-19 world where things have changed, and that includes what looking for roommates looks like. So one of the things that could be important to discuss is COVID-19 safety. Is everyone vaccinated? Is everyone not vaccinated? Is there a particular comfort level that everybody has with that? Is the guidance is constantly being updated by the state? So where are things now and where are you and your comfort levels with your roommates? It's important to discuss all of this before moving in together. And then, are you okay with gatherings? Do you want to have people over? Is that something you would prefer not to happen? Another thing that's really important to talk about is the lease terms and length. When you sign a lease, you're responsible for rent for a set amount of time. So it's really important to be clear with your roommates, whether you all are staying for the long term. If somebody is moving out at a certain point before the lease is over, what does that process look like? Are you able to handle the rent if it goes from 3 to 2 people being divided in the rent? All of this is important to talk about. It's important to be honest about your preferences and in those conversations so that you don't run into awkward scenarios or you're uncomfortable with the place that you're living in and the dynamics that you have. It's much easier to change your mind on living together before living together than when you get to know somebody. Maybe it could be avoided through a conversation. Next slide, please. So I'll also share quickly some first-time renting tips. Again, this is not meant to be your step-by-step guide, but it's some things to think about, whether it's that it's your first time renting or you've rented before and you want to go back into off-campus housing. So one of the things I always say is the moment you know you need housing or you're gonna need housing, that's when you should start looking. I'll say the number one question I get all the time is, when should I look for housing? Do I need to leave a month, 2 months? As soon as you know you're going to need housing, it's good to start doing your research and start knowing what you're getting into, especially if you're not from the San Diego area and you're not familiar with the area. It's good to begin in that way to get an idea of prices, um, what is expected here versus maybe other cities. And a good comparison that I always make is that it's very much like looking for a job. When you're looking for a job, you have an idea of what you want, and you hope that there's a job out there that matches your preferences and your education and your experience. But you're probably going to have to apply to a number of jobs. They're going to review your materials, and then they'll tell you, yes, you've got the job." It's the same with housing. You have to consider your budget, you have to consider what you're looking for, and you have to think about the timeline. You may have a particular move-in date that you want, but it doesn't mean it's going to match up with what's available. So it's always important to really think about your timeline, leave yourself ample time to contact maybe multiple properties that may fall within what you're looking for, and then go from there. So one of the first things you want to do is be realistic about your budget. Uh, a lot of students think, oh, this is listed for maybe $600 a month. That's all I have to worry about. That's only part of it, because you'll have your rent, your utilities, you may have other living expenses that you want to put into your monthly budget, and especially the stability of your budget. Do you have a job? Is that job ending? You may want to look for short-term lease options if your budget is not very stable. And then some one of the things that I have written down here is some of your housing searches may be completed really quickly. Others may take more than a month. It depends on the situation, and it depends on what you're looking for. So again, give yourself quite a bit of time to search for housing. Next slide, please. So some other tips I have here is that leases are, you're legally bound to the rent amount that is owed. So that's really important to be mindful of when you're going into a lease. You're going to be held responsible for a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time indicated on your lease uh, when you sign that. So sometimes what happens is students move out of their current lease without terminating the lease, and then they can get in trouble. So it's really important to know what sort of lease falls within what's doable for you, or for you and your friends or your parents if they're the ones that are helping you get a lease. And San Diego is a competitive market. It's tough, and I know it's tough, and we know it's tough. But ways to kind of help yourself and put yourself in the best situation is to give yourself plenty of options. Know that it's competitive, and don't wait too long if you want to contact a listing. It's great to see something that's, maybe you're searching on one of the platforms I mentioned. Maybe you're on PadMapper and see something that's good for you. I would encourage you to call them as soon as you identify that it's something that may fall within what you want to do, and not wait until the next day or the day after. A lot of people like to compile a list, which is great, but then by the time you may call somebody, they may have already rented out the apartment or the room or whatever it is that you were thinking. So it's good to move fast. Of course, not make decisions harshly and without thinking about the best situation for you, but keep your options open, give yourself plenty of options and plenty of time. And then one thing I see all the time is what to do in terms of scams. So there are scams, and sort of a golden rule here is, if it seems too good to be true, it more than likely is. You'll find listings that fall maybe hundreds of dollars under the average that you're seeing, and the pictures look incredible. And most of the time, those are scams. So it's good to remember, what's the average rent looking like in most of the places you're seeing. If something seems too good to be true, it more than likely is. Next slide, please. Some of the things you can do to protect yourself is schedule a tour. There's a lot of virtual tour options now. So if you're able to do that, that's great. It's a good way to see that the listing actually exists, that there is somebody managing this property, and that they can show you this property should it still be available. And if you're going to a tour and you have some safety concerns, maybe invite a friend or your roommates to go with you to make sure everything goes well. Again, calling and scheduling virtual tours is a really helpful thing to do. Another thing that I recommend when a listing seems kind of fishy is to use the reverse image search on Google. So you can actually save the image that is posted on the listing and then go to Google and do what's called a reverse image search. If you don't know what it is, you can literally just type that. And if that image pops up in more than one place, especially not in San Diego, that probably 100% means that this listing is a scam. And then one thing to know as well is that usually properties require about 2.5 the monthly income in comparison to the rent amount. So that means that per month you have to make usually 2.5 times the rent that you're looking to for the place that you're looking to be in if you're renting it by yourself. If you have roommates, then you can pull all of your incomes together. And if it's a room rental, it might be a little different. But when it's a private apartment or home rental, that's what it usually looks like. Next slide, please. So the last thing I want to share with you, I know I've shared quite a bit of information, is our emergency housing. So emergency housing is available for currently registered students, and it has a maximum of 30 days stay. So again, I want to underline that this is for emergency situations only. So we've seen a variety of challenges that students face. It could be that they're in an unsafe environment. Maybe a student is houseless because of one reason or another. Please be sure to contact us. And the best way to do that is through the basic needs assistance form. And once you do so, you'll be connected to one of our staff members, more than likely me, to learn more about your situation and see if that situation would be a fit for the emergency housing program that we have on campus. Again, I hope this is not the way that we intersect, because I hope that you are not in an emergency situation. But if you ever need us, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Basic Needs Center. You can see the URL here, basicneeds.ucsd.edu/forms. And we have different types of forms that may suit your needs. But if you're in an emergency situation with your basic needs, please don't hesitate to fill out the basic needs assistance form. If you have any questions about the information I shared, please put your questions in the Q&A function. I'd be more than happy to answer as many as I can, and we'll circle back to some of them at the end of the webinar. I'll pass it off now to my great colleague, John Carlos from Student Legal Services.
Okay, thank you, Damian. And that was an incredible breadth of information that I think is going to be really useful for you, whether you're going to live off campus in the coming year or in the future at some point. As Damian said, my name is John Carlos Sr. I'm an attorney and I'm the director of Student Legal Services. So my office provides free, confidential counseling, education, and referrals to all currently registered UCSD students. So if UCSD students have questions, issues, or problems, then they can contact our office. We have 2 attorneys. It's totally free and totally confidential. The reason why I'm part of this presentation is because the single biggest issue that we see at Student Legal Services is with respect to off-campus housing questions. For example, students trying to get their security deposits back after they move out of their place, or unfortunately, roommate issues. That is actually a pretty common one, and so I think it's really important to consider that. Consider doing your best to get to know the folks that you're going to be living with in the next year. So I'm going to go ahead and I could probably talk for hours about landlord-tenant law, but I'm going to do y'all a favor and not do that, and just try to break it down to my top 5 off-campus renting tips. So if you could please move to the next slide. Okay, sorry for all the words there, but as I said, there's a lot of information that I'd love to cover. So these are some of the just sort of the brief ones. Watch out for scams, number one. And of course, this isn't just in the housing context, but in all contexts. But specifically as it relates to housing, unfortunately, sometimes students will be found in a situation where they are sending um, where they're sending money without having seen a place. Maybe they will see an advertisement on Craigslist, and occasionally it's even happened on the off-campus housing website, although it has been a while, and the good folks of off-campus housing do a really good job of weeding out, um, weeding out scams. But just keep in mind that number one, as Amian said, if it looks too good to be true, it probably is. I would suggest that that you should not send a security deposit or any other amount of money until and unless you've actually seen the place and verified that the place is for rent. One thing that some scams that I'll see that students come in with will have an address, but it won't specify the unit number, say, of an apartment complex. It'll just say the address. Um, and again, some places are gonna be too good to be true. And so I would always suggest do not send any money unless you can actually see the place, until you actually have a contract ready to be signed. And I honestly would not pay money until the contract is actually signed. I would make that a simultaneous event. Um, okay, so that's number one. Do your best to not send any money until and unless you verify that the place really is for rent. And we can, and obviously off-campus housing in my office can help you if you have any questions about that. Number two, and again, as Damian mentioned, all tenants slash roommates are jointly and severally liable. That's a fancy legal way of saying that each tenant can be held responsible for the entirety of the lease obligations. And so, in other words, if let's say June 1st rolls around and you pay your share of the rent, and your other two roommates don't pay theirs, the landlord not only has the legal right to go after your roommates who haven't paid their shares, but also you, because of this rule of joint and several liability. Same goes with if a roommate damages the place, but you don't. Well, the law says that your landlord can actually keep everybody's security deposit. So you want to really be sure to know who you're going to be living with. Consider getting a roommate, using a roommate agreement. So if you go to sls.ucsd.edu, that's the Student Legal Services homepage, all the way down to sample forms and agreements, you'll find a Word document that you can customize, where you can write in how much you're paying, each tenant is paying in rent, and how much each tenant has paid in terms of security deposit, and who's going to put what utilities in whose name, and cleaning, and many other things. So in other words, you can make it reflect whatever you want. In terms of the joint and several liability, as noted here, it also applies to co-signers. So a co-signer, also known as a guarantor, is usually a parent or guardian who the landlord is going to request that a tenant identify, and that person sign on to. Basically, that person, by doing that, agrees to be financially responsible. But thanks to this joint and several liability rule, that parent or guardian is not just responsible for their own student, but also for every tenant that lives in the place. So again, you're not only are you vouching for your roommates, but you're doing that on behalf of the parents. And we lawyers, when we get involved, of course, we like to sue everybody. So I always kind of try to encourage students to do everything they can to not sign a lease that requires a co-signer. Ultimately, it is up to the landlord to insist, and of course, landlords want to protect themselves and make sure that the folks that they're signing on to rent are going to be able to pay the rent. And students typically don't have extensive credit reports, and typically don't have jobs and full-time jobs where they can prove that they can afford to pay the rent. So another thing that I always like to mention is go to annualcreditreport.com. Annualcreditreport.com. It sounds like a scam. It's not. That's actually the only Federal Trade Commission approved website where you are allowed to request a free copy of your credit report from each of the three credit reporting agencies once every 12 months. So on that website, annualcreditreport.com, you can get a copy of your credit report. And that's basically what the landlord's going to look at when you apply to determine if they think that you can afford to pay the rent. Number one, to make sure that there aren't any errors. And number two, I think it's important to understand credit and how it works. And I always actually suggest this to folks, to students, particularly the earlier, you put things in your name, revolving credit in your name, the faster your credit's going to build up. And so whether that's a Netflix or Hulu account or a phone account, or even and of course bank accounts, a credit card with a low maximum limit so you don't go crazy. Those are all things that are going to help you to establish credits, and it's going to help you when you apply for housing. So keep those in mind. Number three, as you can see there, get renter's insurance. Some landlords will require that you get renter's insurance. I say whether or not they require it, I absolutely suggest that you get it. And typically the insurance that's required, the basic renter's insurance is going to be personal property. So that's your stuff. And by the way, keep copies of invoices for your big purchases, like your laptop, your bike, expensive things, or at least just take pictures of those big things in case, because renter's insurance will cover you in case of loss, theft, or damage. Most all renter's insurance is also going to include liability and property damage insurance. So liability in case somebody gets hurt. Property damage, though, I would suggest that particularly if you're living in an apartment complex or in a townhouse that shares a wall with another townhouse, make sure that your insurance covers you in terms of the damage to the unit itself. Not all policies do that. And absolutely make sure that you get insurance that covers you in case of a plumbing flood. It says flood there, but I want to be clear that I'm talking specifically about if a pipe bursts, because unfortunately that does happen. Every year we get a couple students who suffer a lot of damage and costs for plumbing issues. So make sure you have coverage in case of plumbing issues. Also mold mildew coverage, and then loss of use. And so that's if there is some sort of like catastrophic issue where there's a flood, so you got to move out for a few days while folks are repairing the place. That's where loss of use insurance will kick in and will basically cover the hotel while you're having to live outside of the place. The law doesn't always require that landlords have to pay that, and typically, in fact, they're not bound to pay for that temporary stay at the hotel. So I would suggest get that. Consider getting, if your parent or guardian owns their home, see if you can be added to their insurance policies. Not a lot of insurance companies will do that, but some will under what's called a dependents living away policy. And those will, I imagine, be cheaper than if you were to get your own. Also, if you have a car and you have car insurance, then talk to that same insurance company and see if they have a deal where you can save by bundling your coverage. Don't have anybody in particular to recommend in terms of insurance company, but get the best you can afford. Shouldn't be more than 10, 15 bucks a month. And as I said, I think it's totally worth it. Next slide, please. And then wrapping up in terms of things to consider. As I said previously, the biggest issue that we see at student legal services is landlord-tenant law, and with respect to security deposits. So one of the first things that you should do, and that you can do in terms of protecting your security deposit, is documenting the condition of the place when you move in. So I always recommend that as soon as you sign a lease and get the keys to a place before you move a single stick of furniture in. Do a walkthrough of the place. Take pictures of everything when you move in, and do it also when you move out, by the way. Also consider, I would strongly suggest that you complete an inspection checklist. You can find that a copy of one of those on our homepage. Sometimes landlords will provide those to you, but make sure that you fill those out. A lot of leases say specifically, I, tenant, have inspected the premises and it's in perfect condition. But if there are any problems, I, tenant, promise to notify the landlord within the first 3 days of moving in. So understand that that it's really important for you to document the condition when you move in. There's also a lot of times leases will require that you notify the landlord at least 30 days before the end of the lease that you want to terminate. So keep an eye out for that sort of clause in your lease. If it says that, that does mean you have to give 30 days prior written notice, even if the lease end date is a fixed date that you already know about. You still got to tell the landlord ahead of time that, yep, you're going to move out at the end of the lease. Otherwise, it's going to turn into a month to month, and you're going to get charged another month's rent. Make sure to do an initial, a pre-move out inspection. Obviously, this is a long time in the future. And then lastly, put repair requests and other communications in writing. You want to be able to prove that you notify the landlord of any repair requests. If there's a leak and the leak gets worse because you didn't do anything about it, the exacerbation of the issues you can be held responsible for those. Last thing, before you sign any lease off campus, feel free to call our office, and we can actually go through the lease and answer any questions that you might have before you do that. So call our office. We're open all summer. So as soon as you get it, feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to talk to you. I think that's about it for my time. I've probably gone over, but I'll hang around for any follow-up questions. And I will turn it over to my colleagues down over in housing.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our summer housing options and our undergraduate waitlist. Next slide, please. So for our undergraduate students who will need housing on campus over the summer, we will have summer housing available on campus. We have 3 programs available. The first is our Accelerate program, which is for our current undergraduate residents who will be taking summer session courses at UC San Diego. And then we have our traditional program, which is for our students who are currently not housed on campus, our visitors, incoming freshmen, and incoming transfer students who are again enrolled in summer session courses. And then finally, we have our short-term transition housing program. Next slide, please. So our short-term transition housing program runs from June 18th through September 4th. And this is for our undergraduate students who may need a little bit more of a flexible summer housing accommodation. The students that are eligible are listed on this page right here. Those are students that are graduating in spring, incoming first year and transfer students who have accepted their offer of admissions, continuing students that are currently living off campus right now, as well as our extension students. The cost is $51 a night per person for a single occupancy bedroom in a shared apartment. It includes weekly custodial service for the common areas, and this does not include a dining plan. So if you are an undergraduate student who is in need of flexible summer housing accommodations, the application is available now, and you can find it by visiting this link right here on this page. Next slide, please. Then I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about our undergraduate housing waitlist. This is particularly for our students who are not currently part of our incoming or continuing student housing processes that are happening right now. So for those students, if you are interested in living on campus next year, the fall quarter housing waitlist will open at the end of June. After we go through our current housing processes and as we get cancellations, if there is any available space, then those are going to be offered to our undergraduate students on the waitlist. Waitlisted students can be assigned to any space on campus. And we did want to note that submitting an application does not guarantee you a space on campus. It really is going to be based off of the space that we have available and the cancellations we receive over the summer. So we recommend having a backup plan and encourage you to review our off-campus housing options just in case. So more information about this can be found at our website. It's hdh.ucsd.edu. I'm going to now go ahead and pass it to my colleague Daniela, who's going to be able to talk to you about our grad housing options.
All right, thank you, Patia. Hello, everyone. So we talk about off-campus housing options and undergrad housing. So we also have grad housing options. So next slide, please. So for grad students, and that applied for grad students, and also let me highlight undergrad students, they can also live in grad housing as long as they are family, they have children, or if they are in a committed relationship, which it requires like some steps to follow, like some documentation that the undergrad couple would have to show to the offices, but it is a possibility. But generally speaking, it's a grad housing. This link that you see, it's for our housing waitlist application, is the same link for both grad students or undergrad couples or families. Next slide. So here is, again, talking about the undergrad option to live in grad housing. Again, the same link for applying for housing. And we have our grad and family communities. It's Mesa 1 Miramar, Mesa Nueva, Nuevo East, and Nuevo West. You can find more information, specifics about each community, how much it costs to live there. And some of those communities are furnished, some communities are not furnished. Some communities have different layouts. We have, for our newest communities, we even have 4-bedroom, 6-bedroom apartments, and we have plenty of studios. We have some 1-bedroom units also in some of the communities. So you really have to go into the website, which is HDH Grad Family Housing at ucsd.edu. Grad Family Housing at ucsd.edu. That's right. So you can see all the communities. You can see all the specifics about each one of them. One question that I get all the time is how long you have to wait when you apply for housing, and it all depends. Our offers are made based on application date. So the earlier you apply, the better you increase your chances of receiving an offer. Our busiest season is fall of every year. So starting, I would say, beginning of August through end of September, this is when the waitlist gets really competitive. So just to give an idea, currently we have spaces available for offer, but we don't have a lot of people in a waitlist who is interested in moving in now in June or July. So if that's something that you consider that you can move in to one of our grad housings now, it's a great choice for you to go ahead and go to our housing application and apply for housing, because the odds are in your favor that you're going to get an offer. The closer you get, again, to the beginning of fall quarter, it gets really competitive. So most likely the people who receive offers, they're going to receive because they apply a long time ago. I hope it makes sense. We also have, I know some people might ask, but what about La Jolla del Sol and Coast? Those are also communities, but Coast is a very small community. We just have a little over 100 apartments, and the wait list is way too long. So if you're a new applicant, if you're an incoming student, I highly suggest not even try Coast, because the chances are you're not going to get an offer for that community. And La Jolla del Sol is specifically for staff and faculty. we recently, a few years ago, opened for grad students, but also they have to be a family or in a committed relationship. And this is all. This is like a general idea about the grad housing. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to send me an email. You can find my information in the website, and but it's dtheus@ucsd.edu.
All right, thank you. I am going to ask all of our panelists to come back on, turn their cameras back on. And I think there were just a couple questions we wanted to try to answer live for you all. One question came up around transportation and parking. Daily permits will be available for students, so you'll be able to buy a permit, and the cost is gonna be somewhere around $4 a day to be able to park on campus for the day. So there'll be more information about that, but transportation.ucsd.edu. It's a really great site for both parking and then also transportation options to and from campus. So that's a great website to check out. And then I'm gonna send this question over to you, Damian. There was a question about what's the average rent price that you indicated you wanted to answer live.
Definitely. Thank you, Patty. Unfortunately, for most of these questions, I have to give the answer that it depends, but that's the most realistic I can be with you all, is that it truly does depend. And some of the factors that will affect the average rent price is if you're going to be really close to campus, if you're open to looking in other places that it may not be as close to campus, but a little bit more budget friendly, and what exactly is your accommodation. So if you're looking for roommates and living with roommates, that's going to be cheaper. If you are renting by yourself, you're going to have to pay quite a bit more. And if you live in one of the more affluent areas of San Diego, for example, La Jolla, you'll see prices are a little bit more expensive. So it depends on which city of the San Diego area you're in. I would say in La Jolla, you can expect to see room rentals go around $1,000, depending on what sort of amenities they have. And studios will probably start at, I want to say, 1,400. I know it's an expensive area, so I would recommend that you explore your options that maybe are a little bit further away, not necessarily an hour-long commute, but a few minutes away from campus will get you cheaper prices.
All right, thanks, Damian. So another question, a few questions in the chat or in the Q&A function were about financing off-campus housing. So just want to encourage you all that if you're interested to find out what sort of resources are available to you, to go to the Financial Aid and Scholarships Office and meet with one of our financial aid counselors that can help sort of assess your situation. Everybody's situation is a little unique, and also point you to resources and scholarships and funding opportunities. So that's fas.ucsd.edu. So encourage you all to go there for that. Let's see, in terms of other questions that I saw, yeah, just a lot of questions about students that are second year students waiting to find out if they'll be living on campus and whether or not to get off-campus housing now and when they should do that. There was quite a few questions in the Q&A function about that. Do you want to answer that one live, Damian?
I'm sorry, Patty, my audio cut off a bit. What was that question again?
So the question was about students that are rising second year students waiting to see if they'll live on campus next year, trying to decide when to get off-campus housing.
Look right now. That's my answer. Just in case, as a backup plan, it's better to be prepared. One thing that I would say is if you're not sure, don't pay application fees right now, but start exploring your options. I know someone said that some complexes haven't posted availability for August or September. I wouldn't expect them to right this very moment. You'll find that those are a little more rare, but I would advise that you start looking right now, just in case that you do get the notice that maybe you're not going to be living on campus. You've now explored what the market is like. Maybe you have some options already. You have some things in the works, or maybe you create a roommate profile if that's what you're looking for as well.
All right, great. And Pachia, I see that there's also just some questions about when the undergrad housing waitlist opens. Some waitlist questions you might want to address.
Oh, absolutely. So our undergraduate housing waitlist is going to open at the end of June. I'm going to go ahead and post the link in the chat so that you have access to it.
All right. And can anybody apply for campus housing and get on the wait list?
Yes, on our undergraduate one, yes.
Awesome. Great. Okay, well, we are coming up against the time for our webinar. We want to just really thank everybody for participating, and especially our panelists for all the good information you shared. We will be ending the recording of this, but we will also be saving the recording of it, and we will post it when it's ready, and hopefully a day or two we'll get it posted up on the Basic Needs website so that you'll be able to access it there. So yes, you will be able to access this this special presentation in a couple days. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great day.